The engine fell off. Not a part of the engine. The entire engine. 10,000 pounds of metal ripped away from the wing during takeoff. The plane kept climbing for 5 seconds. Then it rolled left. Then it dove. 31 seconds from engine separation to impact. Everyone on board knew they were going to die. There was nothing the pilots could do. The controls didn't respond. The hydraulics were gone. The plane was a brick falling out of the sky. It hit the ground nose first at 300 miles per hour, half a mile past the runway. The impact created a fireball visible from downtown Chicago 10 miles away. 273 people died, every single person on the aircraft, 2 people on the ground. It was May 25, 1979, Memorial Day weekend, the deadliest aviation disaster in American history. And it happened because American Airlines decided that following the manufacturer's maintenance procedures took too long. The aircraft was a McDonnell Douglas DC-10, Flight 191. Scheduled service from Chicago O'Hare to Los Angeles. Departure time 2:59 p.m. The DC-10 was a wide-bodied jet, 3 engines, 2 under the wings, 1 in the tail, designed to carry 300 passengers. American Airlines had been flying DC-10s since 1971. 8 years, hundreds of thousands of flight hours. They knew the aircraft. The crew knew the aircraft. Captain Walter Lux, 53 years old. First Officer James Dillard, 49. Flight Engineer Alfred Udovich, 56. Combined, they had over 60,000 hours of flying experience. They had flown DC-10s for years. This was supposed to be a routine flight. They taxied to the runway. They received clearance for takeoff. They pushed the throttles forward. The engines spooled up. The aircraft accelerated down runway 32 right. Rotation speed was reached. The nose lifted. The main gear left the ground. The aircraft was airborne. Then the left engine and its pylon tore away from the wing. The pylon is the structure that connects the engine to the wing. On a DC-10, the pylon is massive. It has to be. The engine weighs 5 tons. The pylon holds the engine in place. It transfers thrust from the engine to the wing. It contains hydraulic lines that control the wing flaps and slats. It contains electrical systems. Lose the pylon, and you lose the engine. Lose the pylon, and you lose hydraulics to the left wing. Lose the pylon, and the aircraft becomes unflyable. That's what happened to Flight 191. The entire left engine and pylon assembly separated from the wing 3 seconds after liftoff. The engine tumbled backward over the top of the wing. It fell into a trailer park near the airport. The pylon ripped away hydraulic lines as it separated. Hydraulic fluid sprayed everywhere. The left wing lost all hydraulic pressure instantly. The slats on the left wing retracted. Slats are the leading-edge surfaces that extend during takeoff and landing to increase lift. With the slats retracted on the left wing but still extended on the right wing, the aircraft had asymmetric lift. The left wing stalled. The plane rolled left, hard. Captain Lux tried to recover. He pushed right rudder. He pushed the control yoke right, trying to level the wings. Nothing happened. The hydraulics were gone. The flight controls didn't respond. The stick shaker activated warning of a stall. The stall warning horn blared. Alarms filled the cockpit. The aircraft rolled past 60 degrees, then 90 degrees. The left wing pointed straight down at the ground. The nose dropped. The aircraft entered a dive. Airspeed increased. The altimeter unwound. 300 feet, 200, 100. The crew said nothing. There was nothing to say. They knew. Impact occurred 31 seconds after the engine separated. The DC-10 hit an open field next to a mobile home park in Elk Grove Village. The nose struck first. The aircraft disintegrated on impact. The fuel tanks ruptured. Fire consumed everything. The fireball rose 300 feet into the air. Black smoke was visible for miles. Emergency crews arrived within minutes. There was nothing to rescue. No survivors, no intact bodies. The wreckage was scattered across half a square mile. Pieces of the aircraft, pieces of cargo, pieces of people. The 2 people killed on ground were in the mobile home park. Debris from the aircraft struck their home. The crash destroyed 4 trailers, damaged a dozen others. But it could have been worse. If the plane had stayed in the air 3 more seconds, it would have hit a residential neighborhood. Hundreds more would have died. The field where it crashed was empty. Memorial Day weekend. Nobody was working. Nobody was outside. Just an empty industrial lot. That's the only reason the death toll was 273 instead of 500. The National Transportation Safety Board arrived that night. They began the investigation immediately. First question, what caused the engine to separate? Engines don't just fall off airplanes. especially not during takeoff when stresses are highest but still within design limits. The DC-10 had flown for 8 years without an engine separation. McDonnell Douglas had sold hundreds of DC-10s, thousands of flights every day. No engine had ever separated in flight. So what happened to this one? The NTSB found the engine and pylon in the trailer park. They examined it. The aft bulkhead of the pylon had fractured. The structure had failed. A 10-inch crack had propagated through the bulkhead until the metal gave way completely. But why was there a crack? Metal doesn't just crack on its own. Something caused it. The investigators examined the maintenance records for that specific aircraft. Registration number N110AA. They found something. 6 weeks before the crash, American Airlines had performed an engine change on that aircraft. Standard maintenance. Jet engines are removed and replaced regularly for overhaul. But the way American Airlines performed the engine change was not standard. The manufacturer's maintenance manual for the DC-10 specified a procedure for removing and replacing engines. Remove the engine from the pylon, lower the engine using a hoist, then remove the pylon from the wing using a different hoist. Separate operations. Engine first, pylon second. The procedure took about 200 man-hours. American Airlines had developed a faster method. Remove the engine and pylon together as one unit. Use a forklift to support the combined weight. Disconnect everything. Lower the entire assembly at once using the forklift, then separate the engine from the pylon on the ground. This method took about 200 fewer man-hours. 200 hours times the labor rate times the number of engine changes per year equaled significant cost savings. The airline had been using this method for over a year. They had performed multiple engine changes this way. McDonnell Douglas had never approved this procedure. The FAA had never approved this procedure. American Airlines just started doing it because it was faster and cheaper. The problem with using a forklift to lower a 5-ton engine and pylon assembly is that forklifts are not precision instruments. You cannot control the exact movement. The forklift operator cannot see the top of the pylon where it connects to the wing. If the forklift is slightly misaligned, if it tilts wrong, if the load shifts even an inch, the pylon can contact the wing structure and cause damage. That's what happened. During the engine change 6 weeks before the crash, the forklift operator lowered the pylon and it shifted slightly. The aft bulkhead of the pylon made contact with a wing support structure. The contact was hard enough to crack the bulkhead. The crack was small, maybe an inch long. Nobody noticed it. The mechanics didn't inspect that area closely because the pylon wasn't supposed to contact anything during removal. They reinstalled the pylon and engine. They torqued the bolts. They tested the systems. Everything checked out. The crack was invisible unless you knew where to look. For 6 weeks, that crack grew. Every flight, every takeoff, every landing put stress on the pylon. The crack propagated, slowly, millimeter by millimeter, metal fatigue. By May 25, 1979, the crack was 10 inches long. The bulkhead was holding together by a narrow strip of metal. Then Flight 191 began its takeoff roll. The engines went to full power, maximum thrust, maximum stress on the pylon. The crack opened. The remaining metal failed. The bulkhead separated. The pylon twisted. The bolts holding the pylon to the wing sheared off. The entire assembly fell away. 10,000 pounds of metal gone in an instant. The NTSB examined other American Airlines DC-10s. They found cracks in the pylons of multiple aircraft. Same location, same cause. The forklift procedure had damaged pylons on other planes. Those planes were still flying. The cracks were growing. More engine separations were inevitable. The NTSB examined DC-10s operated by other airlines. No cracks. Those airlines followed the manufacturer's procedure. Engine removed first, pylon removed second. No forklift, no contact with wing structure, no cracks. Only American Airlines had pylon cracks. Only American Airlines used the forklift method. The evidence was clear. American Airlines had cut corners on maintenance. They had used an unapproved procedure. They had damaged their own aircraft, and they had killed 273 people. The FAA grounded every American Airlines DC-10 immediately. Mandatory inspections, every pylon, every bulkhead. Multiple aircraft were found with cracks. They were grounded until repairs could be made. Then the FAA looked at other airlines. Continental Airlines and United Airlines had also started using similar procedures. Remove the engine and pylon together. Use lifting equipment that wasn't designed for the job. The FAA found cracks in their aircraft too. Not as many as American Airlines, but enough. On June 6, 1979, 12 days after the crash, the FAA issued an emergency airworthiness directive grounding the entire DC-10 fleet worldwide. Every DC-10, every airline, grounded. It was the first time in history the FAA had grounded an entire aircraft type. The DC-10 stayed grounded for 37 days while inspections were completed and procedures were rewritten. American Airlines was not prosecuted. No criminal charges, no executives went to jail. The airline was fined, civil penalties, settlements to the families of the victims. But nobody faced prison time for deciding that 200 hours of labor savings was worth the risk of killing everyone on board. The maintenance supervisor who approved the forklift procedure was not charged. The mechanics who performed the engine change were not charged. The executives who knew about the unapproved procedure and allowed it to continue were not charged. American Airlines paid money and moved on. But the regulations changed. The FAA rewrote the maintenance requirements for all commercial aircraft. Airlines could no longer use unapproved maintenance procedures, even if they seemed more efficient. Every procedure had to be reviewed and approved by the FAA before implementation. Mechanics were required to inspect not just the parts being replaced, but the surrounding structures for damage caused by the maintenance process itself. If a pylon was removed, the wing attachment points had to be inspected for cracks, even if there was no reason to suspect damage. Inspection intervals were shortened. Non-destructive testing requirements were expanded. X-rays, ultrasound, eddy current testing. Any method that could detect cracks before they became catastrophic. Airlines had to report any deviation from approved procedures immediately. Cover-ups were forbidden. If a mechanic damaged something during maintenance, it had to be documented and repaired, no hiding mistakes. No hoping the crack wouldn't grow. The DC-10 itself was redesigned. McDonnell Douglas added backup systems, redundant hydraulics, fuses in the hydraulic lines that would seal automatically if a line was severed, changes to the slat control system so that asymmetric slat retraction wouldn't cause an immediate stall, modifications to the pylon attach points to make damage during maintenance less likely. Every DC-10 in service was retrofitted. The changes cost hundreds of millions of dollars. McDonnell Douglas paid. They had no choice. Their aircraft had killed 273 people. The manufacturer was partially at fault for designing a system where a single failure could bring down the aircraft. But the airline was more at fault for damaging their own aircraft through negligence. The families of the victims sued. They sued American Airlines. They sued McDonnell Douglas. They sued the forklift manufacturer. They sued everyone involved. The cases took years. Most settled out of court. American Airlines paid the most. They were the ones who used the unapproved procedure. They were the ones who damaged the pylon. They were the ones who killed 273 people to save 200 hours of labor. The settlements totaled hundreds of millions of dollars, the largest aviation disaster settlement in history at that time. But no amount of money brings back the dead. Captain Walter Lux had 30,000 hours of flight time. First Officer James Dillard had 29,000 hours. Flight Engineer Alfred Udovich had 15,000 hours. They were experienced, competent, professional. They did nothing wrong. The aircraft failed. They had no warning, no time to react. 31 seconds from engine separation to impact. Even if they had known exactly what was wrong and exactly what to do, there was nothing they could have done. The aircraft was uncontrollable. The best pilots in the world couldn't have saved it. They died doing their job. So did the flight attendants. So did the 258 passengers, families going on vacation, business travelers, a couple on their honeymoon, people visiting relatives, people starting new jobs, all dead because American Airlines wanted to save money on an engine change. There is a memorial in a park near the crash site, a wall with the names of all 273 victims. Every year on May 25th, people gather there, families of the victims, aviation safety advocates, mechanics who learned from the disaster. They read the names. They place flowers. They remember that cutting corners kills people. The memorial exists because American Airlines thought approved procedures took too long. They thought they knew better than the engineers who designed the aircraft. They thought 200 hours of labor savings was worth the risk. They were wrong. 273 people died, and the aviation industry learned that maintenance procedures exist for a reason. Follow them exactly. No shortcuts, no unapproved methods, no assuming you know better. Because the consequences of being wrong are measured in body counts. Every time you board an aircraft, the mechanics who serviced that aircraft followed exact procedures. They used approved methods. They documented everything. They inspected for damage even when they didn't expect to find any. They did it because of Flight 191. Every time an aircraft goes in for maintenance, the FAA can show up unannounced and audit the work. They can check the procedures. They can examine the aircraft. They can ground planes that don't meet standards. They do it because of Flight 191. Every time an airline considers a faster way to do maintenance, they have to get FAA approval first. They have to prove it's safe. They have to test it extensively. They can't just start using it because it saves money, because of Flight 191. American Airlines is still in business. They still fly DC-10s for years after the crash until the aircraft were retired. The executives who approved the forklift maintenance procedure retired wealthy. The mechanics who performed the engine change using unapproved methods went on to other jobs. Nobody went to prison. Nobody lost their career. They paid fines and moved on, but 273 people stayed dead, and the regulations written after their deaths have saved thousands of lives since. That's what a blood law is. Someone cuts a corner. People die. The law gets rewritten, and everyone who comes after is safer because of it. Flight 191 fell out of the sky in 31 seconds. The regulations that prevent it from happening again have been in place for 45 years. The law is written in the bodies of 273 people who died because an airline decided saving time was more important than following procedures.